Good afternoon everybody. Today's tutorial is on resin and using it in our moulds. Today we've got the Riverside bead moulds. So we've got a little crown and a square pendant shape which has a little stick coming up out of it which creates the hole for you to hang your pendant. The crown doesn't have a little hole, so we've actually used it as a brooch. So that's what I did with it. So we made a little brooch out of it, put a brooch back on. That's what we did with the crown. And then we used the pendant. I used a beautiful Riverside beads veil and a jump ring and added it onto a ready-made necklace. Okay, so with the resin, we've discussed this before, but with the resin you have two parts to it. So you have a hardener and the resin itself, and as long as you keep them separate, none of the chemical compounds start working together. So you can have them sat at the side of you for quite some time, as long as you haven't mixed them together. Once you mix them together, the chemical reaction takes place. The resin can start to warm up, but it also then starts the process of, which is like a countdown of curing. So you need to be a bit more wary once you've mixed the two together, that you've got plenty of time to add what you want inside your resin before it starts to cure. Okay, this particular resin is a 1-to-1 mix, so it's the same quantity hardener as the same quantity resin, but yours may well be different. I can't remember what the Pebeo one is, but you need to check it when you get your resin kits. So I'm going to tip our hardener into our resin. Make sure you get as much out as possible, you don't want to waste it. And also, because we've accurately measured this, if you leave any in the other pot, it's going to make your measurements wrong. There we go. And I've got one of these, I think it's actually a tongue depressor I've got, but lollipop sticks are perfect to mix your resin with. And just mix it slowly. Okay. And what we don't want is a load of bubbles in it. But if you do have bubbles, if you are a crafter, you want to use maybe a hot heat gun that we use in crafting. You can use that to just run over the top of it to disperse any bubbles. Alternatively, once you've got it in its cup or beaker or whatever you're actually stirring and mixing it in, if you sit it in a little bath of water, making sure no water gets into the actual resin, sit it in warm water, it will heat it up a little bit and it will help disperse the bubbles away. Okay, so with the crown we used glitter first. Oh, and let me just grab oopsie-daisy. Okay, I knew there was a reason I brought little cotton buds down. That was the reason. Okay, so what I did with the glitter, instead of just tipping it all in, and you can do this with mica as well. I'm just going to move the resin out of the way. So what I'm doing is picking up the glitter on my little cotton bud, and I'm just going to put some in the little heart in the middle of the mould. Just dab it in there. And then I'm just going to dab a little bit in these little bits. Okay, doesn't matter if you get it over the top part because that resin's not going to touch that. Okay, don't want glitter absolutely everywhere, so you can control it to an extent. And you can also do this with mica as well. Mica powders work really well in the resin bases before you put your resin in. Oops, daisy. So bearing in mind that when we turn this out, that's going to be the back of it, okay, and the protrusions in there are going to be the front, okay. So my resin has got a lot of bubbles in it, so just ignore my resin because it's bubbly and I haven't got heat here, but I'm going to put it in just to show you how I actually, what the things I put in were. Okay, and you can see I'm not pouring it in, I'm just popping it in with a little lolly stick. Okay, let's get a cocktail stick out. So if you have tweezers, they are really good to use, especially when you're using gold foil, because it, unlike your gloves and your fingers, the gold foil doesn't stick to the tweezers as much. So when you've got the gold foil, just break a little bit off, so you don't want it in massive pieces. So just, you can use a cocktail stick to just break it down a bit, and then I'm just going to drop the gold foil where I want it. Don't worry about putting it right into the resin yet, just put it on the surface. Okay, whoops a daisy. And then we can push it down a bit more when we've put it all in. So I don't put it everywhere, I just sort of dot it about a bit. And if you have, alternatively, if you have gilding flakes, they're beautiful because you can get like mixes of those. This is just a gold foil sheet that I've been using. Okay, so once they're all in, you can just pop your cocktail stick in and push them down. They can stay at the back if you want them to, but just make sure that they've got resin just covering over the back of them. And with this crown, you just want to make sure that there's enough resin in those little nodules at the top, because sometimes you have to encourage the resin to actually go in there. See, I had a little air bubble underneath, so just make sure you haven't got an air bubble. So I use my cocktail stick to sort of poke in that dome bit at the top, and then if there isn't enough resin in there, you can put a little drop more in. Actually my resin is, the bubbles are starting to disperse a bit, so that's good. So if you feel you've got too much on there, you can always take your lollipop stick and just scrape over the top and just scrape off, and any of excess around it you can just snap that off or use scissors to trim it off. Okay, once it's completely cured. So let's move that over there. So the next one is the stones. And I mean, you can use gravel from the garden. You can use, as I say, these are fish stones from the bottom of the fish tank, and you can just shove them in randomly, or you can be really precise, whoops daisy, and just shove them in. Now again, we talked about when we did the last piece of resin, we did the Fimo slices, and we talked about building it up so that there wasn't just one layer. Again, you can do this with these pieces of stone as well, so you don't have to have them shallow, you can have them layered up if you wish. So just pop them in wherever you want them to go. And if you have like any sort of semi-precious stones, little agate stones, you can even use like the agate beads that I like. You can use those. It doesn't matter if they've got holes in them. You can use those just as easy as any of the others. But you can pop in what you want, really. It's entirely up to you. And I tend to do this one with clear resin. You can do it with coloured if you wish to. You can, if you want, put coloured papers behind it. You could add the foil, you could add glitter. There's lots of ways. I like the effect of it. It almost looks like the stones are in a stream or something like that, that they're in water because the resin's clear. So again, it's entirely up to you. Okay, nearly done there. So I'm not going to pile these ones up. I think they're fine as they are. Now, if you do have any sticking above the level of the depth of the mould, it's fine, because these are organic and they're not going to decompose or rot or anything like that. You don't need to worry about them. It's a good idea to cover them in resin, just because sometimes little things can be rough on your skin and things like that. But if you're not, basically that's going to be the front of it. This area that we've got visible to us, that's going to be the front. So, you know, you don't really have to worry about it if you have got some of the stones protruding slightly. Okay, so I'm just going to drop some resin in. And you need to be a little bit patient with this, because what you will find is you put the resin in, and then maybe 5 or 10 minutes later you can go back to it and the resin will have sunk. So what it does is it finds all the little secret holes underneath, and you can end up with a lot of air bubbles. So I'm just going to use my cocktail stick again and just poke around a little bit to make sure that I haven't got any sort of areas that need refilling. But you do need to sort of leave it to stand for a minute and just go back to it and check on it, just to make sure that you haven't, you know, got any dips in it because of air bubbles releasing and things. So it's a good idea just to, and also just to jiggle the stones about a little bit, just so it releases any air underneath them, because what you can end up with is pockets underneath where there's air bubbles, and then when you turn the mould out, you'll end up with like little areas that have got no resin in them, so like a little hole underneath. Okay, so then I would put these, I'll put it to one side and I'll go back and check on it again to make sure there's no more holes appearing, or it needs another little layer on it, and I'd check the crown at the same time to make sure that the level's still where it should be, which is level with the top of the mould. You don't want it overflowing, but again, you don't want it too far down. So I would put them somewhere safe, somewhere not too hot, not in direct sunlight, and nowhere dusty or where there's animals, because you'll end up with animal hairs all in it. So I'm going to move that over. Okay, so I'll show you with this. So with the beautiful pendant, I put in a bail, and the bail, I'll take it off a second and show you. So the bail is, let's see, it's a filigree leaf one. Okay, so it's beautiful filigree leaf, and it has 2 little sticks on the inside. Now, if it is too deep for your hole in your resin, you can snip a little bit of that stick off, and then just add a little bit of E6000 or GS Hypo cement, any good jewellery glue, and then pop it back in so it stays in. But all you need to do is pop one side in first. So pop that side in first and then line it up, and then all I'm doing is pressing the two together. Okay, then I added a jump ring, and then I added my full ready-made necklace. And you could, if you wanted to, just put it onto leather and then add your ends on to the end, and do it that way. You could add it to chain, it doesn't really matter. So with the little crown, once she was dry, I put glue on the back of her, and I cut a little, I think she's about a 2-inch circle, but I ovaled it a little bit because the circle seemed a bit too big for her. So what I did do was cut round it and made it a little bit more oval, and it seemed to suit it much better. So little piece of black felt, little scrap of it, a brooch back, which is a 3-hole brooch back if you are looking for them online, and then I cut another little piece, just a little strip of black felt, and I glued that over the back of the brooch back like so, and a little bit of glue on the brooch back itself, and then I just left that to dry, and we have a lovely little brooch. And something I was thinking about when I did finish this is that you could stitch through some chain to hang down with little beads or little metal charms, etc., hanging down from it. So you could even bling this up, and you could put seed beads around the edge, a bit like you do with your beaded brooch type things. So it could be really blinged up. It doesn't need to be completely plain. So that's what we did with it. So we had a great time with our resin today, and the pieces we made on our mat, there we go,